Red River. Haldric stood on the shore of the Thurnen River, watching the barge sail away, the firelight of Bachmarkt flickering in the rushing water. He was too late. Wulfhelm got away again. Off to the next market town, yet another day of riding away. Haldric watched the wooden barge light its path, thinking of the next steps in his plan. Bub sleeping on his shoulder. He had two choices: steal a horse or buy a passage on another boat. Maybe there was a third way, if he could get into a merchant caravan. He looked up at his ancestors above, at them gazing down, watching Haldric fulfill his oath, watching Haldric march into a port township in search of a new plan. Blood demands blood, Grimvold had said, demanding justice and satisfaction, and Haldric Eltz would give it, not for the god's sake, but for his own, for his family, for the ones whose lives ended in blood and fire, by axe and betrayal. His eye twitched. The anger in his gut burned hot, demanding action. He needed a path first. Wulfhelm was moving, and so must he. Haldric pushed the anger down, focusing on the next step, focusing on the township lighting up the night before him. Bachmarkt was the perfect name for the township. The whole economy and lifestyle depended on the Thurnen River. From the fish it yielded to the trading routes it offered. Even overland trade started and ended with the river. Local meats, wool, wood, and clay were exported, and almost everything else was imported. From iron to salt, from textiles to stone, Bachmarkt, much like Osthofen, existed to facilitate trade. However, unlike Osthofen, Bachmarkt had no Stamm to rule it. It was an imperial outpost that grew and expanded until it became a town around the outpost, ruled solely by Allardwald, the Hofmeister. The same corrupt Hofmeister ruled Osthofen, and with no Stamm to oppose him, his mutts ran the town. Like the 4 men standing guard by the road, Haldric walked on, and the 12 more trying to hide in the shadows. Poorly. Their eyes and blades caught the firelight, betraying them. Mistakes made by the men gazing into the fire, destroying their night vision. "Hold," said one of the Hofmeister's men, a guardsman of middling height and dark brown hair. Haldric stopped outside the firelight. "What is your business here?" "Passing through." "Step into the light," the man ordered, one hand on the hilt of his sword. "Let's see what the river dragged in." Haldric did as instructed, stepping into the firelight. The man took an involuntary step back, drawing his sword. "Whose blood is that?" he demanded. "My horse," Haldric said, his eye beginning to twitch again. Every moment wasted here was another hoofbeat further from Wulfhelm, and the peace his death would bring. What happened? Ambush. The horse didn't make it. Haldric lied, but it wasn't a stretch, not during the raid season. Bub stirred for the first time in hours, his tail wrapping around Haldric's neck, his tongue slapping up dried blood from Haldric's ear. "What is that?" the man asked, pointing at Bub. Haldric almost told the truth, but Bergtant were not native to these lands. They were mountain creatures from Varnmark, the northwest province of the Empire. "It's a pup." "What kind?" Haldric shrugged, and the pup bit into his ear. And not gently. He had teeth like knives. Pain shot through his head like lightning as Bub munched on his ear, purring all the while. The man studied the pup for a moment longer, then stepped aside. "There is a bathhouse on the southern edge of the town. Go wash up. You reek of death and rot." Haldric nodded, entering the small town. No walls surrounded it, and no watchtowers adorned its edges. There was no need, not even with the raid season. They had nothing worth stealing, and almost no nightlife to speak of. Torches burned in the empty town as he ignored the guard's instructions and went straight to the port. Walking on plank-laid streets, mud squelching under his feet, the port was just as he expected, small and utilitarian. 2 loading docks, a wooden warehouse on the eastern edge, drunk workers and sailors milling about, talking and laughing, wineskins held high, their spirits even higher. And the chatter and laughter died down as he passed, eyes following him all the way to the portmaster's quarters. Haldric knocked on the wooden door, and it creaked open. "What?" shouted a gruff voice. Haldric stepped into the small, empty room, smelling of fish and oil. Papers were strewn about the table, chairs lay on their sides, and clothes were piled up next to another door. Haldric frowned. "When I said what?" The door swung open, and a bold, bare-chested man stepped out, his word-sigils exposed for the whole world to see. A winding river and a boat surrounded by chains and scripture. "Who are you?" Haldric remained silent, glancing at the exposed word-sigils and naked hairy legs. The man looked down at himself, at his exposed manhood, and scowled. "Never seen a man before?" He growled, taking a step forward. His scowl faded as he studied Haldric's face. "Who are you?" he asked again, his voice harder now. "And what do you want?" "I'm looking for passage." "At this hour?" the man asked. "Where to?" "Brewhafen," Haldric said, looking at the door behind the man. A tall, blonde, and muscular woman stood at the door, naked as the man was, with the same weird sigils tattooed across her chest. Maybe there was a stam here, though small and insignificant. Or they moved here for work. He grunted, leaning over the work desk. "Work calls. Give me a minute. Never seen a naked woman before?" she asked, sounding curious. Haldric turned away, looking at the naked and hairy man as he rammed through the papers, cursing his luck and work, and the strange, stinking man at his door, and the mutt on his shoulder. Haldric ignored him, feeling Bub's claws in his shoulder. The pup stretched and jumped down, circling the room, nudging papers and smelling corners. "He is so cute, and such a strange coat," the woman mused, kneeling. "Brown around the snout and neck, and the rest gray. I want one too." She extended a hand, and Bub happily sniffed it, then allowed her to scratch his ears, his purrs filling the room. "That's dried blood," the portmaster said, grabbing one stack of papers. He scowled and threw them aside. "We made a mess," he muttered. "Dried blood?" The woman pulled her hand back, eyes locking on Haldric. "Really?" He nodded, and Bub jumped on the desk, stomping all over the man's papers. "From what?" she asked. "Dead horse," Haldric said, gesturing for Bub to return. The little pup looked at him and turned away, sniffing the paper. Then the pup began eating it. "Hey!" The portmaster pushed him away, and Haldric stepped forward. But he didn't need to intervene. The Bergtant cub growled and snarled, showing his teeth and drooling over the man's ledgers. All three watched the little one's body vibrate with the effort, bared teeth gnashing on air. He looked threatening, feral even. "Come, boy," Haldric called. This time, Bub responded, backing away, his big green eyes locked on the portmaster. "That thing is feral," the man said. Haldric tapped his shoulder. "Anything?" Bub sprinted up his leg, over his hip, and onto his shoulder, intelligent green eyes watching the room. "A mercantile vessel ports in about an hour," the man said, reading what its cargo was. "Delivering iron ore and picking up wool. Another hour or so. You can set sail in roughly 2 hours." Haldric nodded, turning away. "Passage is 2 silver coins," the man said as Haldric left quarters. "And the bathhouse is south of here," shouted the woman. "You should be more careful," Haldric told Bub. "He is a lot bigger than you. Don't start fights you cannot finish." The pup growled, baring his teeth and biting the air. Haldric blinked at him, shook his head, and headed for the bathhouse. Almost 2 hours had passed since Haldric arrived at the bathhouse. since he washed his clothes in hot water. Sweat, dirt, and blood painted the bucket black long before he finished. The attending woman had to bring him 2 more before he was done. Before he hung his clothes to dry over a simmering fire, all of his gear displayed for the world to see, he lowered himself into the hot water, washing away dirt, grime, and blood. And same as with his clothes, the water around him turned dark brown. The filtration system worked tirelessly, and yet it failed to filter out his filth. The woman had sighed, cussing him and his beast out, as she prepared another bath. Haldric didn't really mind the dirty water. He had bathed in worse, much worse. Bub seemed to have the same opinion. The little beast swam around, or tried to. The pup slurped up the dirty water, his paws swimming aimlessly, but he managed to stay afloat, mostly. And as they changed baths, the little one discovered jumping into the water. And now, for the last hour, Haldric sat, feeling the aches leave his body, as the little Bergtant jumped over his head again and again, splashing into the warm bath. Even the attending woman stopped to watch, smiling at the cute little thing. Not knowing it would grow to be one of the deadliest predators in the Bachmarkt mountains. Not knowing how the pup came to him. Neither do I, he thought, submerging his head, thinking of yesterday's events, of the thin place and Grimvold's words, trying to figure out what was meant literally and what figuratively. Did I really die? Haldric touched his rough pink scar. The skin felt jagged under his fingers. Even in the warm water, Bub swam past him. His tail swept side to side like a rudder, guiding him through the water. Mouth open as he drank the oiled-up water. Was that dangerous? Haldric asked himself, still underwater, a hand held over his itching scar. Mind churning over yesterday's events. How he reached for a knife and found Bub, growling and snarling, teeth bared, protecting him. Why? Grimvold held a Bergtant's form. Wouldn't it make more sense that the pup gravitated towards his own? Now, was that hard? Grimvold had asked. To kneel for him? But that too made little sense. Haldric still reached for a knife. Even beaten and bruised, he was ready to fight. He hadn't given up. His body simply failed him. That too now felt off. Yes, he hit his head hard. Yes, the snout smacked him into a mountain. But he survived worse. He fought through worse. Even if he hadn't, the fact that he was up and about a few hours later made no sense. If he had been beaten so badly he could barely move, how did he recover so swiftly? Had Grimvold used magic? Haldric's eye twitched, anger rising in his gut. Had Grimvold played with him? Remember your God, and don't make me reach out again. The words echoed in his mind, terrifying him all over again. He wasn't afraid of dying. He lived with death for all his life, so why? Why did he fear Grimvold reaching out again? Haldric pushed his head out of the hot water, taking a deep breath. It's not death that terrified him. No, it was Grimvold himself. What could he do to me? Haldric asked, Bub soaring overhead. A lot, Haldric muttered, getting up. His body felt suddenly heavy like a river stone, but also better than it had in weeks. Warm water was a blessing and a luxury he rarely had time for. He stepped out, forcing the thoughts of Grimvold out of his head. There was nothing he could do about the god, or his cryptic warnings and threats, but there is one thing he could do. Haldric stared at his tattooed arms and the 2 final names adorning his chest. Finish his list, and his path led to Wolfhelm next, then to many others. Bub, let's go, Haldric called, grabbing his gear. A boat awaited them, a good night's sleep and the road ahead. Men and women long dead, simply unaware of it. 3.5 hours later, he sat at the bow of the merchant vessel, the cold river wind cutting through his drying cloak. Sailors around him worked, ignoring him and his sleeping pup, even as they hounded at the heels of the Imperial barge, finally bringing it into view. It moved sluggishly, sitting deep in the river, poles pushing against the riverbed. some 40 enslaved Virdbrook rowing in unison, the square sail catching wind. Haldric stood, watching the distance shrink, the barge growing ever bigger, slow, heavy. His eye twitched, the scar beginning to itch again, and the trill of the hunt rising in his gut. It has been over a year since he last faced someone on a boat, in the cramped spaces with nowhere to run, nowhere to turn properly. But a barge would be different, with ample open space, surrounded by enemies, and the ground itself unstable. That was something he never experienced. So open, so vulnerable, so exciting. In his mind's eye, he saw Wulfhelm throw the torch into the animal pens, where his grandparents hid. He barred the door close, grim determination adorning his face. He hadn't laughed like some others had, nor did he look sickened by their actions as others did. No, the man had been a professional, through and through. Haldric could respect that, if his professionalism didn't lead him to Villa Eltz. Focus, he told himself, averting his eyes from the barge and thinking of a plan. The layout of the barge left no means of infiltration. Therefore, stealth was impossible. Nor was hunting possible, leaving with only a few options. One, to wait for them to dock and end it on land. 2, jump on the barge and have to fight their way out. And that meant certain death. And 3, get on the barge and somehow avoid all the other men. How to do that, he thought, eyes scanning the mercantile vessel. Theodgar waved at him. Haldric blinked at the man, at his shadow. Haldric shook his head, unsure if his eyes were playing tricks, but Theodgar's lazy, casual posture, as he leaned against the railing, was unmistakable. So was the smug smile and polite wave. How did he get on? When? Haldric glanced at the barge, fast approaching. Then back at Theodgar, the man pushed off, making his way over the deck towards him, probably ready to gloat and taunt, or maybe criticize his conduct in Osthofen, or something else entirely. Haldric didn't know, nor did he care. Images of his burning home returning to his mind's eye. Fire, he breathed, turning to look at the barge. Just a stone's throw away, and closing in fast. Haldric grabbed Bub into his hands, stepping up to the back railing. The pup stirred, claws biting into Haldric's arm as he yawned, eyes opening slowly, lazily, as if there was nothing to be worried about. He glanced over his shoulder at the barge. They were passing it. His eyes turned to Theodgar. The man looked confused, head cocking and brow furrowing. Haldric vaulted over the railing. Bub whined as they flew through the air. The pup whimpered as they hit. Haldric rolled with the impact, letting the pup go and grabbing a torch. Men around him froze mid-motion, eyes wide at the madman who just boarded an Imperial barge alone. Haldric threw the torch down into the storage area, where weapons, coins, and oil were held. It clanked against the edge of the hatch, rolled in, and then nothing. He had missed the oil. Imperial soldiers around him shouted, drawing weapons. His heart sank as he leaned over the hatch, staring at the still-burning torch far from the barrels. No rush of flames, no chaos, just 24 angry men, pointing swords and spears at him. But he could still salvage this. Bub growled beside him, claws tearing into the deck. Haldric grabbed his oilskin and pierced it. Dark oil squirted out, smearing the deck and dripping between the boards. He tossed it down into the hatch. Flames whooshed upwards. Wood crackled underfoot. Men screamed. Haldric walked, second oilskin in hand, spreading the dark liquid and looking for Wulfhelm. He didn't have to look far. The man shouted orders at the drummer, pointing towards the shore. Calm, composed, and professional as he had always been, Haldric dropped the oilskin, drawing his sayax. Wulfhelm turned, shouting at the poleman. Their eyes met. The man blinked rapidly, eyes darting up and down, assessing Haldric, but there was no recognition in his face as he drew his blade. That made the scar burn. That man came into his home, killed his family, then forgot about it? No, Haldric thought, picking up speed. He would make him remember. Bub howled. Iron smashed into iron. Wolfhelm stepped back, and Haldric pressed. His short backswing got blocked, but Haldric's fist connected with the man's nose. Wolfhelm staggered back. Reeling from the punch, Haldric pounced, his blade cutting the air, aiming at the man's torso. A third sword cut the air. Haldric ducked, spinning away into yet another man. Haldric sidestepped the thrust, a knife flashing in his offhand. Blood sprayed. The man fell, fire latching onto him. But Haldric already moved on, rushing two men. Wolfhelm parried a sword strike, his own knife flashing. Haldric twisted, dodging, right into the next blade. His sayax flashed, battering the sword away, but leaving his side exposed. Wolfhelm pushed their advantage, stabbing for his ribs. Haldric staggered back, trying to get out of range. Bub's teeth sank into his wrist, drawing blood. Claws wrapping around his arm, locking in place. Haldric regained his footing, spinning on the second soldier. Sayax met sayax in a middle bend, iron grinding against iron. He pulled back, releasing the pressure, and the man lurched forward, into his knife. Blood sprayed Haldric's face and hands, entering his mouth and eyes. Blurring his vision, still Haldric spun. Bub slammed against the wood, whimpering in pain. He couldn't spare the pup a thought. Wolfhelm was on him, strike after strike, relentless, pushing him back toward the raging fire. Haldric parried yet another strike, dropping his sword and coming in close, meeting Wolfhelm halfway, forcing Wolfhelm into his domain. The man tried to recover, slashing up, but it was no use. Not when their noses almost touched. Haldric grabbed his wrist, knife flashing, bit into skin, then jaw. Wolfhelm's eyes went wide, mouth agape, as blood flowed around the blade inside it. Haldric pulled his knife out of the man's jaw. Wolfhelm gurgled, trying to back away, but Haldric still held his other hand. "Villa Eltz," he whispered, his voice drowned by the whooshing fire behind them. "It is only fair." Haldric pulled the dying man closer. "Burn, like they did," he whispered into his ear, letting the man fall into the fire behind them. But unlike his grandparents, Wolfhelm didn't cough or scream. He simply burned. Haldric rolled his right sleeve up, and he found Wolfhelm's name. The first in the column inked on his biceps. The bloody blade sank into the muscle, blood bubbling to the surface. Pain radiated through him, silencing his burning scar. And for a moment, Haldric knew peace again. For a moment, he could close his eyes and breathe. Bub's whimpers reached his ears. Haldric opened his eyes and rushed forward. The pup stood on wobbly legs, shaking his head, blood adorning his gray fur. Haldric snatched him up, fingers prodding the fur, looking for a cut or a stab. The blood wasn't his. "Good," Haldric breathed, stuffing the puppy under his arm and running towards the railing, towards the bound men who screamed in pain as the barge burned around them, oars long forgotten. Haldric picked up speed, ready to jump. Shore was way off, and the river deep, but the fire killed indiscriminately. Bub bit his wrists, claws biting into his side. Haldric jerked, almost stumbling. The pup bit him again and jumped down, growling and snarling, claws digging into wood. "What?" Haldric asked, looking around. Men around him forgot about him, fighting the fires. The pup growled again, his whole body vibrating. Haldric stared at the pup, unsure what it meant. Then the beast clarified. He ran. To the chained men. To the slaves. Growling at their chains. "No," Haldric snarled back, reaching for him. Bub's snarl grew, drool dripping on the wood. "No," Haldric ordered, but the little thing didn't move. "Fine," Haldric snapped, turning to the terrified drummer. The man didn't try to put the fires out. He didn't even play the drums anymore. He stood, mortified, watching the barge burn, watching it break apart. Haldric grabbed the keys dangling on his belt. The man shook himself, looking at Haldric, at his bloody face and hands, and ran. Haldric unlocked the first slave, a short, bald man, pushing the keys into his hands. "Free the rest." The man stared at him, not comprehending. "Now!" Haldric ordered, and the man obeyed. Haldric turned to Bub, who stood his ground, watching him. "Let's go." The pup's green eyes narrowed, and his white teeth flashed. "No?" Haldric thought, watching the beast stare him down as if he were the bigger one. Haldric grabbed a rope next to the railing and tied it to it. The thick mast cracked, tilting to the side. "Come," Haldric said, tying the rope to an arrow. "Come now," ordered, and the stupid mutt finally obeyed. Bub sprinted up his leg and back, taking his place at Haldric's shoulder. He aimed and fired into the dark forest. The rope unwrapped swiftly, then stopped. The arrow hit something. Haldric grabbed the rope, took Bub under his other arm, and jumped overboard into the swift and dark river. The rope strained, squealing as the barge made its final turn. It crashed into the riverbank, dark smoke exploding into the air, blanketing the starry sky. Haldric looked at it, at the vanishing stars. What would they think of this? He asked himself. Were they even watching? Bub bit his ear, purring loudly. Haldric wanted to slap the mutt. He almost killed them both. But so did Haldric. He patted the pup's furry flank, turning back to the barge. Freed men jumped off the barge, some into the river, others directly onto land, half naked, shivering, afraid, all blinking into the smoke, blind in the firelight. Haldric stepped out of the darkness, watching them cringe away, huddled together, trying to make themselves small. The chains might have been broken, but the men still had slave minds, beaten into submission over and over. "You are free," he said, watching them shiver as he spoke, as if his words were a whip. But that was it, wasn't it? They weren't truly free. Not until someone bought their freedom for them. "Take the coin from the barge and buy your freedom." "And go where?" said the bald one, the one Haldric freed. "The world." Haldric turned, but Bub purred on his shoulder again, his tail brushing Haldric's neck. He paused, half-turned, eyes fixed on the dark woods ahead. It called to him, offering escape, silence, safety. His eye twitched. He had done more than enough. He saved their lives, gave them a shot at life. Wasn't that enough? But what kind of life would they lead if they did so? Become Weirdbrook again? End up in chains again? The itch returning to his scar. The peace never lasted. "A man named Theodgar will be here within the hour," he said, his voice low. "He will give you oaths, Werdsugels. Make you a part of a stam." Haldric let the implication settle in. He let them process that news. He let them stare at him, their postures slowly changing. Hope breaking through despair. "Tell him you, coin, and the weapons are the mess I'm leaving him," Haldric said, and finally stepped into the darkness, back into his realm, back into safety and comfort, Bub purring all the while. You've just listened to Red River, Episode 5 in my Kill List saga. I post new stories twice a week, and right now, the Kill List saga and the Collapse are running side by side. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe for more. And don't forget to check out the Collapse for some zombie survival horror. Yes, it's exactly as it sounds. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.